Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we teach you how to use trends to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
We are Spark Partners. To learn about how to grow your business using trends and so many other insights, please go to our website at sparkpartners.com. So today, Adam, I'm going to bring out an old friend that I've showed and mentioned before, our good old buddy, the Sony Walkman. And if we look at a company like Sony, and you look at the really meteoric rise they had back in the 80s and 90s, and a subsequent sort of plateauing, and now they're hardly even a brand name. I mean, they still are. They're still in existence, and they're doing okay, but they're not the pioneers they once were. So in today's topic, today's podcast, I want to talk about some of the pioneers that when I was a kid were at the top of the food chain. And companies like GE, companies like Sears, companies like Blockbuster that we know where they are now. And these were all companies that, when I was a kid, I couldn't imagine a world without GE, without Sears. It just didn't make any sense. So give me your thoughts at a foundational level about those particular companies that I just mentioned. And then I've got a question to ask you about whether or not you think that the executives at these companies knew what was down the horizon, what was headed for them as they were just doing business as usual.
Well, sure, Manny. And as you know, I've been following General Electric and Sears in particular for a very long time. Sears was one of the earliest companies that I tracked. It was around 2006 when Fast Eddie Lampert, who acquired all of the bonds of Kmart, he took over Kmart, and then in a surprise move, they took the bankrupt Kmart and had it acquire the New York Stock Exchange listed Sears in a transaction. A lot of financial engineering went into making that happen. At the time, the Chicago Tribune called me on the phone and wanted to talk to me. And of course, what they were hearing was in Chicago, which was Sears headquarters, and Kmart was headquartered over around Detroit. They were getting all this. Oh, this is fantastic. Oh, this is wonderful. It's going to be this great, wonderful thing. And I was the one who said it's going to be an absolute failure. And got the headline on the business section because of that. And I said, you don't put a bad heart and a bad liver in a new patient and expect them to get up and walk away from the table after the transplants. Both companies were severely out of step with retail trends. So in some ways, talking about that, and then you talk about GE, which a decade ago, I said that the CEO of General Electric, Jeff Immelt, was one of the 5 worst CEOs in America, and that he was destined to destroy General Electric if they didn't get rid of him. And of course, that's happened too. But as we see the headlines recently, this last very recent weekend, last Sears store in all of Illinois was closed. There are no more Sears stores in Illinois. There are no more Kmart stores in Illinois. And it's a bit like, somebody, you run into a friend and the friend's got a suit on. You say, well, why do you have a suit on? I say, well, I'm going to a funeral. Oh, really? Did somebody die? Yeah. My friend Joe's father passed away. And you shake your head and you go, wait a minute. Didn't your friend Joe's father, have a heart attack like 5-6 years ago? And I go, yeah. And he said, well, I thought he was going to die then. Well, we knew he was going to die, but with modern technology, with modern healthcare, he was able to live an additional 5 years. And you kind of walk away thinking, well, he was on borrowed time because, if it had been a little bit earlier, then that first heart attack would have killed him dead and he wouldn't have made it anymore. And that's kind of where we are with these companies like Sears and General Electric. We can look at them and we can start seeing that they're in terrible, terrible shape. And on the one hand, you'll have the deniers. They'll say, oh, wait a minute, I'm sure that this company is much better off than we think it is, and I'm sure that it'll turn itself around. And then on the other side, you have the people saying, well, that's fatal. What the situation is fatal. And then what happens is, in reality, they just linger along, getting a little worse, a little worse, a little worse over time before they finally kind of go away. Now, this is an important story, though, because what we need to do is realize how this impacts us in business. First of all, we tend to want to often not admit that some business is in really, really bad shape. That, despite what its past was, it's on the precipice of failure. So we like to be deniers. That's a very common misperception. The problem is if your customers are in bad shape, if your suppliers are in bad shape, right, then this is not good. If you're investing in one of these companies that are in bad shape, it's not good, right? So if you're working for one of these companies that's in bad shape, it's not good because you're probably not going to get your retirement. So you could be interacting with these companies and you need to realize that they're in bad shape. The second thing is to realize that if you think they're probably going to die, it won't happen instantly. That rarely happens. It usually has a prolonged period of lingering and lingering and lingering. And during that period, we don't quite know what to say. We don't quite know what to do. We don't quite know how to act. And the reality is you need to flee, right? You need to get away from those. You need to get better business relationships. You need to head off into a new direction. Unless we don't take those actions. And I think that's what Spark Partners is all about. I founded the company 20 years ago, and Manny, you and I have been together now for a few years as partners. But the whole idea here was to say, folks, the trend is to tell you what the future will be. The future is not undecipherable. The future is not some big guess, that we have no idea what's going to happen. We actually can see it coming. If we take a look at what's going on in the world around us, we look at trends, then we can make these predictions. The reason I started writing a blog almost 20 years ago was to make predictions. And now you can go look at my blog. It's on adamhartung.com and kept the archive there forever. And you can see how I make predictions about companies like Sears and General Electric. Why is that important? Because we're making predictions now about what's going to be happening in the future. And so if we were able to do it in the past and we were highly accurate, it tells you something about how accurate we can be for the future. And what's more important, we can teach you. We can teach our listeners to start thinking about what's going on in the world in a sensible way to say, wait a minute, the future won't look like the past, but we can have a pretty good sense of what the future will look like. And we knew a long time ago that Sears wasn't going to make it. We knew a long time ago that Craftsman Tools with their lifetime warranty wasn't going to mean anything because it wouldn't be a Sears store to take it back into.
No, not at all. So here's a funny question for you, Adam. Could you be a farmer? You
be a farmer?
Yes. Could you be a farmer right now? Could you leave everything you have and go buy 100 acres and become a farmer?
And enjoy it? No.
Okay.
Do I think I could probably pull it off? Yes, because I have an agricultural background. Do I think I would enjoy it? No.
Do you think you'd be any good at it?
I'm sure that I would be good at it. I'm sure that I would have more crops than the average person because I would pay a lot of attention to the details of the data trends for moisture and, what kinds of crops did well and how you would plant and, to bring together the data to get the maximum yield I could out of the land and the livestock.
Well, see, you're kind of an anomaly. You asked anybody around you whether or not they could be would want to and could be a good farmer, and 99.9% would say absolutely not. They would not enjoy it. They wouldn't be good at it. They can't even keep a house plant alive, let alone 100 acres of corn or soybeans or whatever. And the implication I'm talking about here is kind of talking in reference to your comment about some of the predictions that we make. And for those business people out there, as you were saying, Adam, the future isn't some, black magic. Predicting the future is not black magic, or we don't have a crystal ball. It's just looking at the trends. It's a methodology. It's something that I was opened up to when I first met you a few years ago, Adam, in your ability to look out and see these trends moving like giant icebergs in one direction and then coming together. I mean, I think there is a science to it. And this is one thing we do a lot at Spark Partners is sort of tease out that science of how it can be done. So what do you think the average business person out there can do to start looking at these trends and start looking in the future as far as their own business is concerned and the market around them?
Well, let me link this back to the question you asked earlier about the leaders of the companies like GE and Sears. Do they see it coming? And in my history, the answer is that they see the data and they never interpret it. In other words, you can say, oh, look, there's a growth in retail. There's a growth of electronic commerce. There's a growth of specialization. There's a growth of specialized brands. You look at these trends and say that's going to turn negative. It's going to be bad for a Sears. It's going to be bad for a Kmart. The issue is that the leaders will tend to see the data, but they don't interpret it in terms of what's going to happen in the market. Instead, they look at the data and say, how do I try to fight that data to get the most out of the company the way it is today? Instead of, maybe like in the case of Sears, they should have closed all their stores much, much earlier. They should have gone into whole hog into competing with Amazon. And they could turn themselves into an electronic commerce company. They could have probably been effective at it. They probably could have put up a pretty good fight with Amazon, and they could be a real player in the game today if they'd have made some really difficult decisions 15 years ago to make that commitment. But what business leaders will tend to do is they'll see something like that, this change happening, but they won't act on it. First of all, they'll be that denier. Right? Yep. Okay, I'm going to deny that this is actually going to be fatal to my business. And they go down and they waste a lot of time in that denial mode, trying to preserve the status quo, trying to defend and extend the business that exists today. Then that is a fool's errand, because we can look at the trends, we can see where it's headed, and you say, well, it's going to fail. And you say, now just imagine, 30 years in the future, do you think this business model will work? And the answer is no. If you don't think it's going to work 30 years in the future, why don't you change it today? And then it usually comes back to I don't have to. I don't feel like I have to make it happen today. And that's where I think we see these business leaders going wrong all the time, is that they're looking at a lot of data. They see it out there, but they don't try to interpret that data in terms of, well, how could that hurt my business and how could it create an opportunity?
If you think about some of those decisions that are made, a lot of it goes back down to the human condition of pride and bias and nostalgia. And those things that lock people in. It's another form of lock-in, right? It's almost like psychological lock-in, and that these leaders, these decisions they make are just terrible decisions.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's incumbent on the business people that listen to this podcast to look around them in some of their favorite companies and really take a full step backwards and analyze these leaders that you might hold so amazingly dear to your heart, like the Elon Musks of the world. And these are brilliant people, the Warren Buffetts of the world, right? They're looked upon and revered. And I think we can appreciate them and we can respect their stature, but we also have to be very cautious in looking at the decisions they're making. I mean, I don't trust a politician, at all, but there's some value to them, right? I don't trust a lot of business people either, but there's value to them. And so I think you got to really be open about taking a half step back or a full step back, looking at the decisions they're making and whether or not that's going to have some alignment with emerging trends to see if that company is going to survive or it's going to die.
Well, we know that companies that are long-lived, that demonstrate success over the long term, they have two qualities that are really crucial. One of them is disruption, and the other one is use of white space or blank space teams.
Yeah.
All right. So disruptions. If you go back all the way to 1997, and you have Neutron Jack Welch is running General Electric, and it's doing phenomenally well. The company's growing like crazy under his tenure as CEO, making tons of money. The stock price is shooting up. He goes to every division. He makes a decree. Every division in General Electric has to create a destroyyourbusiness.com team. What he did was he said, here's the internet. I see the internet happening around me. I see all kinds of things happening. I got my cell phone now. I got all this, I can see it. I don't know what it means for my businesses. So I want every business in General Electric to create a team, a dedicated team. It'll be called the destroyyourbusiness.com team. And I want you to say how you would use the internet to destroy your business. Now that's disruptive. That's saying, instead of saying do more of the same, instead of saying tell me how you're going to be successful, he literally said, I want you to tell me how the internet could destroy the business. Now that's great, because what happens is now you get the insight, right? And Jack Welch was, he was called Neutron Jack because he was a very disruptive entity in that regard. He didn't let people sit on their laurels. It wasn't a more of the same kind of leadership. It was a constant challenge, constantly trying to say, how would we disrupt this business? How would we disrupt this market? What new technology could we bring in? What new business practices could we bring in? If we are going to be in this business, how can we act differently? How do we make sure that we can quash our competitors to stay number one in our marketplace? That was the kind of language that he used. He was replaced by a CEO who came in and said, oh, this is too complicated a business. We're going to make it simpler and easier to run. And he certainly accomplished that. And the GE is now a much simpler, easier to run, and far less valuable company, right? So that's the first thing, is disruptions. We don't disrupt. We have to disrupt. If you want to be successful in your business, be disruptive. Talk to your reports. Say, hey, what's happening in the world that could disrupt us? How could our suppliers disrupt us? How could a new technology disrupt us? Then once you start to see that these things could get into your business, you have to set up teams to develop the future. Somebody who's running the business all day long, 5 days a week, they can't pull their head out of that to do the scenario planning and figure out what the future might look like. You have to have people really focused on that, dedicated on that, people that can get outside the old box and think. Yet, I have to be honest with you, it is the very, very rarest exceptional company that I walk into, and they have anything approaching blank space teams that are doing anything like that. In fact, the opposite happens. When I say, hey, look, what are the things that could be affecting your business? How could somebody turn it upside down? The leaders will scratch their heads. They'll start telling about how technology and new business practice, globalization, really have them very, very scared. And I say, well, do you have a team focused on creating the new future? The answer is not only no, the answer is, well, I don't have the resources. I'm like, wait a minute. So you're putting all your resources into what? Defending and extending, trying to protect the model that is under attack. And when you know it's under attack, you keep putting all your resources there instead of coming up with a new solution, instead of coming up with a new opportunity. So the big thing that I see that people miss is they just don't want to disrupt, and they don't want to invest in these blank space teams, these white space teams that can go out and figure something new out. So they see it. They know there's threats. They're scared of the threats. They're scared of what the future might bring. They know that this could wipe them out, but they just won't disrupt, and they just won't put in place these teams. If we could do those two things, if our listeners do those two things, you're going to find out that your likelihood of long-term success is going to be many, many multiples the average.
I agree. And I think that somebody like Jack Welch has had tremendous emotional intelligence. Tremendous. That's a word that's been thrown around the past, 5 years or so, this notion of emotional intelligence. But it takes a lot of intelligence, a lot of humility to really look at that potential right in the face, the potential of your company going down the tubes. If the executives at Sears back in the year 2005, sitting on that boardroom, would have really looked in the mirror and thought about, okay, what's really happening in this world right now, they would have made better decisions, and they could have been even bigger than Amazon is today. Having distributed warehouses across the heartland, you kidding me? That would have been epic if they would have been really thought about the process. And they could have literally shuttered 7/8 of the store. They could have kept the front for whatever, their craftsman line. Everything else could have been a warehouse. They could have distributed everything from their warehouses. And it's sad to see that they're going to be gone fully in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, in fact, I did casework on this back at the time. And with the specialization that was happening in retail, one of the things Sears did was it opened up stores that were focused on particular product lines. Like they opened up special stores. I think they called it Sears Home Goods. But all it sold was like furniture, right, and stuff for the house. They opened up a Sears Hardware, and all it did was focus on tools and lawnmowers, things like that, right? And that was a direct, looking directly at some of the things that were happening in retail and trying to go after it. But get this, the people that ran the traditional retail stores complained, and they said, what's happening is now people, instead of coming to a traditional full-line Sears store to get some tools or to get some furniture, they're going to the specialized store. And so what should you say? Well, you better get out there and compete harder, because if you can't make it as a full-line store, we'll have to shut you down, right? Let's let this become a competition. Let's fund what should happen. No. What the leadership at Sears did was they literally put a cannibalization charge on top of the specialized stores. They said, okay, we've estimated that 7.5% of the customers who bought in your store would have gone to a mainline store. And so we're going to transfer 7.5% of your revenues over to make the mainline store, the full line store, look better. That's how far they went. Financial machinations, adjusting metrics to try to protect and defend and extend that original Sears store.
That is, that just makes my stomach turn that they would actually do that. As a hardcore capitalist, libertarian kind of mindset guy, it just kills me.
But it's again, it's that I don't want to disrupt. I don't want those stores to go away. Here we are, Sears, we're the mega Sears with all the buyers and the merchandisers, and we've got the big, office building in Hoffman Estates, Illinois, and we think of ourselves as the great Sears company, right? And if we had to take those Sears that are now, the go-to store for the shopping malls, and we started saying we're going to close some of those down, well, then what would that reflect on me as a leader? I can't do that. I don't want that. My job is to try to protect the past. And that's, again, all of this behavior that we see trying to protect the past. What do we see today happening in the pandemic? The pandemic came, it went, and what do we see the educators doing? Oh, we got to get all these kids back in a classroom. I'm like, oh my gosh, come on, get real with this. There's problems with the education in the classroom. It's just fraught with problems, right? You have, you don't give enough resource to the brighter kids who could go further. You put too much resource into some of the kids that need special handling in order to get their education. You let biases occur in the classroom. Gender bias happens. Racial bias happens. You have bias based on just looks. You have bias based on athletic capability, where, the better ball players get treated better in school than some of the other people. All these biases that are in that traditional schooling system are quite well known. Why does everybody need the same textbook? The idea of giving people an equal chance to get started, which is where public education was born, has now become let's treat everybody the same in a world where we know that's not the best way to get the best outcomes. Yeah. So during the pandemic, we went to this more specialized education, people working from home, and what do they say? Well, some kids didn't do well. Really? Okay, I would believe that. So let those kids go back to a classroom. If they need a classroom in order for their instruction to be more meaningful to them, well, then do that. But why does everyone need to go back to the classroom? Well, they only need everyone to go back because the teachers want their jobs. They're trying to preserve those jobs. The school board's preserving the job. We've got a building that's got a bunch of classrooms in it. We need to use it. All of that is the classic defend and extend behavior. We got to defend the educational system as it used to be, being protected by the school unions, the school board. And then we just need to sit down and say, wait a minute, we just had the biggest disruption imaginable with the pandemic. It's time to get beyond that. It's time for us to take education where it ought to be, with more, more attuned to the needs of each individual student. We now have the tools. We've got Zoom in everybody's house. We know how we can get internet to everybody. We know how we can get specialized instruction, and we can get Chromebooks and other tools in their hands. We know that. Yeah. But we have a lot of people trying to go back to the old way.
You should hear the conversations, and I've got children that are in the public school system, and you should hear the conversations in the background that are happening regarding schools, going back to schools, and mask mandates, and there's so many things. It's not even funny, and these kids are sort of in the middle, right? They're just, at least for me, school was just a thing I did. It wasn't really, I didn't love school. It was just somewhere I went, and I did very well in school. I just would skate by on A's and B's just without even studying. That was a different time. Now these kids are being fed into the same machine that was only really useful and relevant during the birth of the American, industrial era, like 80 years ago. This should have been changed 80 years ago. During like the 50s, right? It should have been 40s and 50s. It should have been a way different conversation. And here we are, big disruption, and nothing changes.
I was raised in a rural area. There were 145 people in my high school graduating class. 115 of us started kindergarten together. I'd say it was a little bit inbred, huh? And one of the things I remember was I was a little bit brighter than the average lamb. And by the time I was, starting my junior year, pretty much completed all the requirements for high school. I was taking shop classes just to fill up the day. And I remember saying, look, I just want to graduate, just let me graduate. I'll go on and do something else. And I'll never forget the principal looking at me and saying, no, one of the requirements we have to graduate from our high school is you have to be here 4 years. Well, tell me that made any sense. It made no sense at all. I spent 2 more years sitting around in a high school in rural America. Again, I took welding classes and I took woodworking classes because I'd completed all the academic classes that were available in that particular high school. It was a small rural area, limited number of students, limited number of classes, nothing else for me to do but learn how to drive a tractor, and things like that. Yeah. that didn't help me at all. But we still have that sort of mindset, right? We still have people out there, instead of saying, how do we get the most out of the system? They're trying to protect the old system. And this is what's bleeding into our businesses. We take that same mindset and we start saying, how do I keep things going? Another classic example. We know that we're going to go to all electric cars, right? By 2030, you're going to have Tesla, but GM's already said all their cars are going to be electric. Several of the manufacturers have said by 2030, all cars that we sell, brand new cars, are going to be electric. Okay, we know that. That's only 8 years away. Yet, we have people out there operating gas stations. Okay, there's 10,500 gas stations in California alone. How many of those are we going to need whenever half the car fleet is going to be electric? And by 2030, it probably will be half the car fleet. So you need 5,000 fewer gas stations. Who's thinking about that? If you own a gas station, are you selling it? Are you getting out of that business? What are you thinking about doing with that real estate? We can see it coming. We see it coming. That's what happened with GE. That's what happened with Sears. We can see it coming, but do you really do anything with it? Or do you try to figure out, how am I going to be the last guy, am I going to be the last guy making buggy whips? And you don't want to be the last person making buggy whips, because there won't be one, there'll be 10. Nobody's going to make any money, and the buyers are going to just beat the price down, and it's going to be no fun at all. That's where I'm trying to get people to think, look, we know what's happening. We know these trends. Are you really looking at them and saying, hey, how's this going to hurt my business? And B, what opportunities does it create?
Yes, and this is a really good segue into two things. The first of which is we have a report called Trend Report 2030, which looks at the top 66 trends happening in the world today. Please email me or Adam, Manny@sparkpartners.com or Adam@sparkpartners.com, and we'll get you a copy of this. It's free of charge. It's a way for you to see what some of these trends we're talking about are. And it's a great tool to use for your own business to compare, to see how many that you're aligned with. The second thing I'll talk about is this is a perfect segue to discuss our course, Think Innovation. This is exactly what we teach you in the course. We teach you how to get out of your box, think differently, think about your business in response to these trends, and not just outward, sort of things, but also how to actually run your business in a way that there's a philosophy inside, that you're looking at what's coming next. You're looking at your customers and you're trying to solve their problem in new and better ways. And you're not sort of tied into the same way of thinking, which led you to that success. And it's commendable. Clap, clap for that. But if you want to survive the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, you've got to think differently, which means you have to act differently.
Well said, Manny. I mean, people, the tools are there. We've been at this for 20 plus years. Trend spotting is something that you can do yourself. We can teach you how to do it, and the class will help you put it into your business planning cycle. Once you've got it in your business planning cycle, you can start planning for the future instead of planning from the past. And if you plan for the future, like I said, electric cars, how's that going to impact your business? Autonomous cars, how's that going to impact your business? There's a lot of these trends that are going to happen. There's nothing that's going to stop them. They're already showed up. But are you thinking about what they're going to do to your business? That's where the course comes in.
Yeah, you know what? I just thought about an idea. I know that we're fast approaching the end of the year here. We're talking about, 6 weeks till the end of the year. It would be fascinating, and we'll see if it's possible to do another webinar like we did a number of months ago. It was a great hour worth of discussion between you and I. We had a bunch of people on board. So you and Adam will talk about this to see if it's viable. It'd be amazing if we could. I know the end of the year for both of us is a little crazy, but it'd be great if we could carve that out and make it happen. And I'm excited for 2022 and beyond.
I think anybody should look at the future and say, it's just so bright, I got to wear shades. Unfortunately, a lot of people look at the future and say, I'm so scared, I don't know what I'm looking at. Let's turn that around, folks. Let's turn it around, and you can be successful. That's right, Manny.
Okay, take care, Adam. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.